Thursday night Chassidus and music class. We've been exploring. Just it's interesting to try to find our path through, but exploring sources and concepts that basically can help deepen our experience as musicians, can give us like tools from wisdom of Torah, from the wisdom of Chassidus, to approach music in a more powerful way. And obviously Chassidus is well known to be something that can help bring a person's life into balance. But there's been a lot of approach to applied Chassidus, applying it to different things in life, even to very just success in life, success in relationships. So certainly musicians can use that, to figure out, there's a lot of online resources for how does a musician make a living nowadays, for example, how to succeed in the new music business, that kind of thing. And while those things can be very useful and valuable, but if you dig a little deeper, the question of how to make a living, for example, really touches the question of why am I even playing music? Because a person, obviously, if that's their job, and you play what you need to play to make a living. That's like basically doesn't always equal the music that brings the most joy. In many people's experience, in my experience, playing professionally for a number of years, the decision to play only music, and there are musicians who really can kind of keep their music career limited to a area of music that, or at least projects, even if it's varied projects, that they really enjoy only and get paid for it. And it's not, I don't think it's like a tiny minority. In fact, I think there's musicians who are creative musicians who are making things happen like that. But obviously that takes a lot of creativity itself. But then, sometimes it seems uncanny that a person has the drive, a person has an ability to overcome obstacles, to stick to the music, especially stick to the music that brings a person a lot of joy, which inevitably is probably going to be the most creative music that person can bring. And certainly if a person is not necessarily convinced that that's their livelihood, or certainly a person has a large family, has other commitments, lives in Brooklyn or in New York City, it's not on a student salary or whatever expenses level, then it's really a temptation to be like, I just can't devote time to this. What's the importance of this? So the idea that music is important on its own right, as its own thing, regardless of whether you're a career musician, or regardless of whether, when a person feels like they suspect that it might be only for me, like there's an attitude, especially in the Hasidic community, that I'm not going to do things that are just for me. That's considered selfish. It's just me time is like anathema to the Hasidic outlook, for right or wrong. They could be discussed, but essentially that's the message. Like me is like, forget about it. Our goal is to live a life of service, to devote ourselves to our families, our wives, our children, our communities. And what's in it for me is not a question that an honest, or let's say, someone who's being honest about what Chassidus demands of them is going to be openly asking, or I don't know, honesty is the right word, but it's like, it's taboo to say, like, what's in it for me? Though it's also understood that when a person is really operating on all cylinders and as a giver, then they're going to get what they need, but it's certainly not a direct path always. So with the sources that we can help to grow in that way, so that's like, let's say, making a living a big issue, a big topic that we had been speaking about regarding how music is a livelihood. It's a spiritual livelihood. It's a spiritual livelihood in a similar way like prayer is a livelihood. Meaning most believing people know, especially observant Jews, they know that prayer, even though it's not logical, that prayer as part of your daily routine is going to bring you money or to make anything successful. In fact, it seems like a waste of time in the grand scheme of things if a person is really trying to be super efficient with their time and they believe that their money comes from going to the office or phone calls or putting in hours or this or that. That seems counterintuitive, but obviously most people know that we need time away from chasing, and so prayer is one of those things that a lot of people in today's day and age don't inject into life. And more, I think, on some level, and certainly going to the gym or something we've talked about like that, it's an idea of something that's for your well-being. We'd all understand that idea of the need for a break. So let's say a person, so music is like that too. Music in a way is a break from regular life. It's very much like prayer. It's like, it can be like going to the gym, It's a well-being thing that's even more than certainly going to the gym. And in some ways, I wouldn't say more than prayer, but in some ways more it's more of a compassionate act. It's more of a giving act than prayer. At least in a revealed way. Because prayer essentially you're doing on your own. Or you might be joining in a group of people and you're helping them improve their overall prayer. But music is something that can be broadcast. Music is something that can touch potentially thousands, millions. So it's really, obviously that could be an ego trip, and this is another big topic of how does music become something that is powerful and personal, but not an ego trip. That's a huge topic that we've been touching on and get deeper into. But also how can it be something that is really conveying something really important and deep, and is essentially an act of compassion, contribution in a broad way. So that's the idea of music as like a break from regular day-to-day life. If we approach it right, whether as a listener or as a player, certainly as a combination. If we're learning, playing, we're hopefully listening and growing, and those are important. It brings us, it gives us a mode of that kind of joy, that vitality, that kind of groove that drives and engines our day. So that's, often, then we make time. A person makes time for their instrument, and they get into it. And as people who devote a little bit of time to their music, it can be that address some of their challenges, meaning it gives them a real break, a real respite, and resolve certain emotional challenges. I know that's been like that for me. But then there's been also times when I've been really into playing, where the instrument itself becomes a thing that I need a break from, and so that's it's been such a case that especially for musicians who play a lot, who practice a lot, especially those, let's say a person's very inspired, and then they taking a break, time away from the instrument. It's understood that when a person, there's a lot of people talk about it, that when a person, let's say, practices something, Herbie Hancock talks about it, and many others, that when you kind of go to sleep is where the work, you finish practicing, you finish off, and that's where the work kind of, your brain starts to reflect and absorb. So there's a lot of a mental musical game, both in the realm of sleep. There's also, I remember I was once a really talented gospel piano player, and I used to be involved in my college gospel group, that he was just this incredibly intuitive musician. I said, how'd you, playing these incredibly complex chord changes with this great groove, and I said, how did you, he couldn't read music at all, it was all by ear. And I was just, how do you find the motivation, the time to practice with, he's a busy guy. He's like, I practice mostly in my head. He told me. He thinks about the music and he imagines himself playing, and he made huge jumps. Victor Wooten talks about that too. So that's like the mental game of music. But then there's, let's say, an experience that I had, and imagine others have had it, as an observant Jew, taking a mandatory break from, with Shabbos, right, from a lot of different things, from driving a car, from using a cell phone, and from musical instruments. So it's an interesting prohibition against musical instruments on Shabbos, which we discuss a little bit. But essentially, there have been times when I've been really into playing music, and then Shabbos comes, and I'm like, I gotta take a break. Okay, I'll go do my Shabbos thing. Okay, fine. And then when Shabbos gonna be over? Okay, so back to the piano or whatever it is. That's an experience I've had. I think I'm not having it right now, but it's experience I have that I think maybe people can relate to, especially people who get a lot of spiritual energy from playing music. That taking a break from it can seem, again, that if music itself is a break from some of the stresses of life, and taking a break from that seems counterintuitive. But obviously, Shabbos is a certain gift. There's a wisdom beyond, And there's a reason, if you look at deeper reason, why are musical instruments not allowed on Shabbos in practically, because the truth is that they are allowed on Shabbos in the ideal setting. Musical instruments are actually, ideally, their ideal role is on Shabbos. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but the thing is that according to Jewish law, according to halacha, that musical instruments are an essential part of the service in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Right? May be rebuilt soon. Right now we don't.
Shabbos?
What's that?
On Shabbos?
On Shabbos. But the most important time for the musical instruments is on Shabbos. Musical instruments are every day, but the most important time, in fact, as we're going to mention in the sources, that it's a doubled music. It's like a double, in Shabbos is a double music. It's actually extra, like we do have extra prayers on Shabbos. A Musaf prayer, which literally means an extra prayer. Music accompanies all that. Musical instruments, particularly. It's pretty amazing. And so, but that is specifically only in the Beis Hamikdash. It's amazing. Because outside of the Beis Hamikdash, instruments are completely forbidden. And there are a number of other things that are allowed in the Beis Hamikdash that are not allowed outside the Beis Hamikdash. And the reason for this, the fundamental reason for this, is that it's understood that when the temple in Jerusalem is built and it's operating in its full function, there's actually a tangible revelation of godly light, godly energy. And all of the prohibitions that let's say the things that we use to guard the Shabbos, right? With mitzvah, right? Right, la'avil shamra, right? To shut, like b'shmarta es Shabbos, right? We should guard Shabbos. So, guarding Shabbos involves not doing certain things. So Shabbos is a very, very holy day. And the deeper nature of what makes Shabbos so holy can be. There's a number of different things. They're not always intuitive. Carrying a heavy couch from one room to the other is not considered work on Shabbos. But carrying a paperclip out into the street may be considered work. So that the idea is not always intuitive, it's a spiritual thing, but ultimately the Shabbos prohibitions, there's what's called biblical prohibitions and rabbinical prohibitions. So the biblical prohibitions are the ones that are more or less explicitly stated in the scripture, in the Chumash. And those are actually very few. There's very few biblical prohibitions of Shabbos. We learn now there's 49, and there's certain malachas. There's a whole system of understanding. What's it? I'm sorry, 30. Excuse me. The whole system of understanding how to learn that out. But the actual prohibition, the way we practice it today, is extended much beyond the basic biblical prohibition, as we know. So as when it comes to musical instruments are completely permitted. There's nothing biblically prohibited about musical instruments. But rabbinically, these fences that we place around Shabbos, which there are many, many fences, which are to help us, to enable us to keep Shabbos holy without the spiritual sensitivity that we would have in the Beis Hamikdash. That's essentially why we have rabbinical prohibitions, to either as reminders or as a fence, so we don't come closer to transgressing a biblical prohibition. But essentially, in the Beis Hamikdash, there are no biblical prohibitions, rabbinical prohibitions. Excuse me. Essentially, with certain exceptions, but essentially, when it comes down to the fact that we can experience the godly revelation, then we don't have to be worried about transgressing. Right. So, for example, what is the prohibition of playing instruments on Shabbos? It's one of the 39 forbidden labors called is makabu patish. It's the idea of completing literally makabu patish means a hit with a hammer. It's the act of completing, creating a vessel. So if someone let's say has a clay bowl, right, and it's like that's somehow attached, right, to the potter's wheel or whatever, obviously I know you don't attach clay to a potter's wheel, but whatever, somehow it's attached to a mold or something, and you remove the mold, that's all you did, that's a forbidden, because you're actually finishing the object. So with a musical instrument, tuning it is considered makabel patish, and it's only rabbinical, because ultimately you're not really fixing it. The thing's already made. But if you, let's say, attached a string, there's a whole discussion in the Gemara about how can you attach a string. There's disagreements on Shabbos. Can you attach it, tie it normally? You have to kind of like just attach it, And in the Beis Hamikdash, there's a discussion about that. But that's specifically talking about biblical prohibition. Rabbinically, it's completely forbidden. Because meaning instruments are forbidden because you might come to attach a string, like that broke, or you might come to tune it to fix it. So that's so in contrast to our daily life now, without the Beis Hamikdash, where we don't play music. So we don't where the prohibition of playing music on Shabbos, again, as I had in my experience, had been something that was a little challenging. Recently, learning to have a sense of how it's actually not only helps me spiritually, but it actually helps the music. So taking the idea and the theme of this class is taking a break from the music, taking a break from your instrument, right, is helpful for the music. And there's a deeper reason, as we're going to get into in the source, there's a deeper reason why, even though playing instruments is deeply connected to Shabbos, but without the Beis Hamikdash, without that godly revelation, it's actually necessary to refrain from it in order to keep that connection, in order to keep that holiness, that in other times of the week we can actually channel through the instruments.
Just begashmius, the fact that if you play your instrument every day, then Shabbos you can't. When you get to play again, you get this extra energy that comes from the frustration that you did play, right?
So that's like a lot of things with Shabbos, right? That you take a break from certain things and you get to appreciate them more. So let's say there's a deeper reason. We'll get into a little bit of it, and so this is actually on the top of this sheet, and the sources again are at soundheitsrecords.com. You can look in the classes section or the events section, the PDF. Sources is just 2 pages, and it's taken from what's called Devar Malchus with the Pineach Mar Makomos, which takes the Lubavitch Rebbe's talks of 1991 and 92, and these extensive footnotes that are listed there actually bring some of the original sources. So I thought it just summarize these nicely. So and this also is going to reference a lot of very fundamental concepts in Chassidus and music, which we're going to get into much more, God willing, later. So let's just skip to the second one on the right-hand column on the bottom. This is from Or HaTorah Bereshis. This is from the Tzemach Tzedek. And
154.
Yeah, that's on page 154. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So Tzemach Tzedek says like this: L'chol olam v'olam b'Shabbos, hem yotzim b'shir v'nigun. So in every world on Shabbos, they, referring to actually the worlds themselves, they go, so to speak, go out. We'll talk about what that means, with a song, with a melody. Mashkas of Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos, as King David wrote or sang, that this is a song for the day of Shabbos, meaning the day of Shabbos is a certain kind of song that affects all the worlds. Damashma Shabbos Dafkahu Iker Hashir. So what's implied from this is that specifically Shabbos is the main time for song, which is, again, seemingly a contradiction to the practical practice that we don't play instruments on Shabbos. In the parentheses, Bizman Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, Hay Iker Hashir, the Shabbos. So the main practice of music was on Shabbos. Ki inim Hashir v'nigun Waliyah van Hagbal b'mahus l'mahus. You mind closing the door? She'ein be'erchel klal. So that the whole idea of a song, and this gets to, again, one of the fundamental ideas: what is the nature of music? The whole idea of song is elevation and transformation from one form to another. She'ein be'er klal, that has no comparison to the previous form. That's the nature of music. If somebody wants to change, or cause a change, or affect a change on any level of creation, from not just a slight change, but a complete change, a mahos lamahos, from one type of existence to a complete other type of existence. That happens specifically through song. She'ein zois ela al yedei shir dafka. It's an amazing statement of Chassidus that transformation only happens through music. Transformation and elevation only happen through music. Okay, so this is again one of the reasons for being of Sound Nights. Is because as a Chabad house, as a place for Chassidus, this is a message that I don't hear anybody else emphasizing. So we take it upon ourselves to emphasize that if you want to grow, you want to transform, you need music. Figure out exactly how to put that in your life, but that's the idea. V'atam liyos k'ari anu roim b'nigun yesh b'chinas penimius hanakudash b'leiv. So what's the reason? He gives a little reason. What's the reason for this? Why a melody, why music equals transformation? Because using words and logic. So anything within the music. Is the letters of thought, which was forming conscious thought, is becoming nullified through the power of the music, which is completely beyond, which is not limited and is not necessary to have letters. Thank you. It's an amazing concept. So this idea that what keeps us in a certain place in life is our thoughts. And they are stuck specifically with words, with conscious thoughts. They could be subconscious too, but the subconscious thoughts also take the form of words. And then there's actually a phenomenon. The person can dredge up words, phrases that have been operating on their brain for years and bring them conscious. Usually music, actually, I've had an experience with music, and more than one experience, one particularly poignant experience. I went to this amazing concert. It was actually an evening of duos, a lot of amazing players from all spectrums of all types of music.
Duos, two.
So yeah, it was amazing. Actually, nice thing to try here. But basically, everyone gets 10 minutes on stage, and every musician overlaps with the one before them by 5 minutes. Completely free improvisation, these duos. And there were like 20 people, so it was an amazing evening. And the music was incredible. And Bernie Worrell, who was the keyboard player for Parliament Funkadelic, was one of the many, Questlove was there, my friend Dash was there. There's a lot of, the bass player for Sonic Youth was there. It was like a whole mixture of people. And these very interesting duets. And I'd seen a friend I hadn't seen for years, and it was one of these experiences that, it was like, I said hello, and it was a little, awkward, whatever, and immediately a thought came to my mind. And it was really incongruous, a strange thought, a grown man thinking like, nobody wants to talk to me, something to that effect. It just popped up in my mind, and it was part of like the music had like brought it out. I was like, and I looked at it for a second, and I was like, wait a second, I realized that phrase, and I'm not quoting the exact phrase, something like that, nobody cares, whatever, to have me around, or something like that. But it was some self-defeating thought that I realized had been operating in my brain for years. and it just like popped out in my conscious, and I was like, oh, like I could recognize it, and I could actually like say goodbye to that. And it was actually extremely liberating. It was a very powerful experience, and that specifically happened through music, but it also happened. It was a liberation of these words that were so limiting, right? And that's the idea of transformation. It's one example of an idea of transformation from one state of thinking, one state of being to another. So, meaning a person comes out of this structure of thought and words, it's just a simple voice of the melody. Meaning even though it's a physical nigun, it's coming from a physical voice, a physical heart. And it has no comparison to grasping something intellectual. And most people look at that as something much lower than intellect, right? Someone sings a happy song, you're not thinking deep thoughts. You're not making plans to conquer the world. You're just dreaming. You're not even thinking anything. You're just experiencing a song. So it could seem like it's lower, but there's actually much higher. There's actually much higher. Because a nigun that has any real intention has no letters. It's interesting why it's well known that the Alter Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe, very much encouraged his Chassidim to sing wordless songs. And there's a place for songs with words also he actually wrote. And then the numerous songs he wrote, many of them had words. So he didn't outlaw songs with words. There's a place for songs with words. But there's a certain purity and power to music without words, because it completely transcends the nature of letters and logical thought. And the reason is because it's higher than an external kind of thought, intention, and a way of grasping things. I mean, sometimes our grasp on the world, our personality is built up of truths that we hold dear. That's our hasaga. And it's like almost the idea of holding on to something really tight and letting go of that, being able to completely let go of what we believe. And there's a lot of fear involved in that, because a person might believe rightly so, and it probably could happen. A person gets too deep into totally abandoning their previous personality that they lose touch with, and it's a certain fear that you lose touch with certain important truths. But the fact is, we can talk about how there's protections for that kind of extreme experience. But in normal circumstances, you're just letting go of the limiting thoughts, the limiting, even if they worked for you before, but they're limiting. They're not enabling you to become a new person, to transcend that.
The experience of mixing both dimensions is very powerful.
That's right.
Playing a nigun and then singing and then going back to music and then back to singing is...
We're going to see there's a combination. So we're going to get to the point where musical instruments on Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash, but what this represents in our lives becomes a perfect marriage of these realities. Because ultimately, escaping the realm of words is like escaping the world. So that's not the ultimate goal. We talk about the ultimate goal is dir betachtonim, is a dwelling place in the lower world, right? And so the idea that we're going to escape is a means to an end. It's meaning it's going from mahus lamahus. It's going from one type of paradigm to another. But the danger really is leaving one paradigm and not really having a new one. That's the, so to speak, the potential danger. But the idea of where the words themselves can become one with the essence is an ultimately what he's going to talk about. So element kudos piminiusa. So the nigun comes from the inner dimension. So this is the fact that a person can't grasp a melody. I mean, you can't logically grasp a melody. It's not something that stands logical scrutiny. the fact that a person can't explain logically to a person while they're singing, right? But it means that a person can actually understand even more deeply. Or if I want to tell you how I feel, so I'm going to tell you, today was, a rainy day, and I was feeling a little, down, or I was feeling very happy, whatever. I struggled with this or with that. Or I could sit, and you kind of think about the things in your mind. Or I could sing you a nigun and convey that in a much deeper way. Va'ikar ha'inyan. So the main thing, Shashir hu ha'aras ha'keser, hu bechinas ta'alim hu. So we're gonna stop here inside the source, but it gives us a clue now to the Kabbalistic reality. The main thing is the nigun, a song, a music, comes from keser. Keser means the crown. It's the divine attribute which is beyond all the other divine attributes. It's beyond the intellect, particularly. Right? An intellect is beyond the emotions, and emotions are beyond words. And so this idea of music is from keser. So what is the quality of it? And we're going to continue this particular source next week. But there's already teasing out a really powerful application to this, which is that, number one, the idea of music as complete transformation, so it would, on one level, require us to take a step away from an instrument. Because an instrument is kind of like words and letters. An instrument is it's an actual tangible object. So if the goal is to be completely come out of yourself, then an instrument is seemingly hemming you in, literally, quite literally. You're behind that instrument, it has its specific parameters to how music can be expressed on it. Obviously you can be creative and find different ways, but ultimately, if you want to completely transform your way of thinking about music and about life and about everything, you have to step away from the instrument. Because the instrument is a keli, it's a vessel, it limits and holds the liquid that's inside of it. But then again, coming back to it, there's two dimensions of song. Right from the Mishnah, he's going to quote, coming up in the source, which we'll get into next time, which is from a Hasidic twist on a Mishnah about Shabbos, Kol ha-yotzim b'shir, Kol ba'alei shir yotzim b'shir v'nichnasim b'shir. That all, that in the laws of Shabbos, in the Talmud on Shabbos, it's talking about animals, ba'alei shir. Shir is literally a collar, in terms of the simple meaning of the Mishnah. Ba'alei shir, any animal that wears a collar, can go out with the collar and can go back in with the collar, meaning they can carry the collar, because carrying, even for our animals that we own, is one of the prohibitions of Shabbos. But the word shir, not coincidentally, is the same letters as shir, as song. So the Alter Rebbe interpreted it as Kol Baalei Shir. All the masters of song, the ones who wear a song, who carry a song, are able to go out with a song and come in with a song. And what he referring to, essentially, is this idea of transformation. There's two dimensions of transformation. There's transforming out of, and then transforming into. Yotzim v'nichnasim. So going back to the instrument, so to speak. So touching the essence, touching the complete nullification of our previous status, our previous way of thinking about things, is step one. And step two is re-entering with that new consciousness with your instrument, or with your, the regular weekday, or with your life circumstance, whatever it is, or your new way of approaching a problem. And that all is through music. And so the music on Shabbos is even more powerful. It's the music of silence. In fact, in the Gemara it says that it was very hard for them to allow us even to speak on Shabbos. Meaning the rabbis understood how holy Shabbos was. And speech is also an act of a certain kind of active creation that potentially gets in the way of the powerful revelation of Shabbos, the quiet reflection of Shabbos, which is a deeper dimension of music. But the speech on Shabbos, the fact that we're allowed to speak on Shabbos, on one level it's an allowance. It's meaning it's because we're not on that level. So, but on another way of looking at it, the Tzemach Tzedek says, it's like the instruments in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, which is the highest level of instruments. And in that case, those instruments are not taking up space. They're not acting as limiting factors. They're actually the complete unity of the essence of godly revelation with the physical world, and without any contradiction, without any ego, without anything standing in the way. And that's instruments on Shabbos. But that, right, so that's, and on a smaller way, we can experience that with our instruments at any time, that idea of, but it takes sometimes taking a step away, not over-identifying with, that's why it's good in the jam to sometimes jump on an instrument you never played before, you know, to try something new. You know, it gives you a whole new perspective as well. Take a step back. So, you know, bottom line, we should have a complete transformation, with a complete redemption. It's going to be with music, plethora of music, and a lot of joy. So, Alright, so let's get to the music.
Wow.
Stuff, good stuff.